JC, we have some great news to begin today's episode of NRL Offside, mate. Unlike the 2026 premiership title hopes of the Parramatta Eels, our podcast, our humble little footy broadcast, well, it's actually made it to round 2. So I think we need to congratulate ourselves on that, mate. Let's just take some time to let that sink in. Okay, mate, now we have that out of the way. Welcome to today's show. How's your week been?
Well, g'day, Noz, and hello, listeners. Mate, I'm going well, mate. And how good is it having the NRL back? We had some cracking contests, a few blowouts, some big names delivering, others not quite firing yet, and we had a few new names announcing themselves. In this super humid Sydney weather at the moment, there's nothing better than sitting back at home watching 4 straight days of footy, mixed in with the odd beer and a nice ale. I won't mention the Roosters just yet. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later, mate.
Mate, we will. Don't you worry about that. Your Chooks may have just missed the dreaded 50-point hoodoo, but, mate, they did come within a bee's proverbial. I have thoughts. I'm sure you have some thoughts as well. But before we get to those, we do have a couple of things to do today. Firstly, we want to say thank you to everyone who listened to the first show and sent through such positive feedback. We really appreciate everyone that took the time to listen, as well as those who sent their well wishes. Hopefully, we've got everybody back for a second listen. Hopefully, those people have brought a few friends along. Secondly, the show itself. So last week was our introduction show. I did have some feedback that it verged on the self-indulgent, so none of that today. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of our weekly show. We're going to start with the recap of the week that was. Now, we've come up with what will hopefully become one of our hallmarks, which is our speed round. We're also going to do things that caught our eye over the weekend of football. We're then going to go into the grapple. So for those people who listen to the introduction, the grapple is our weekly discussion of the game's issues and hot topics. We have an absolute ripper to discuss today. And then we're going to go on to preview next week's games. Now, this one I'm particularly excited about, Johnny. I know you're excited about it too, but at the end of today's pod, we are launching our experimental new segment. It's called Freeballing. Sounds very intriguing. I'm sure it's piqued the interest of our listeners. We'll explain a little bit about that later. But, mate, we can blow our trumpets as much as we like. We all know from the history of rugby league, you don't win the competition in round 1. Maybe Parramatta have shown that you can lose it in round 1, but you can't win it in round 1. It is all about sustaining that momentum. So today, Johnny, our challenge is to channel our inner Melbourne storm and keep our roll going. So with that in mind, we're going to go straight into our recap, Johnny, starting with speed round, 8 games, 2 minutes-ish. Let's go.
All right, let's start with the first game, Knights versus Cowboys. Good win for the Knights to kick things off in Vegas, I thought. Their back line looked pretty dangerous. Brown, Sharp, Ponga and Best. Mate, these guys came out 100 miles an hour and really put the Cowboys under pressure straight away. Hopefully the Sharp injury isn't too serious because he looked razor sharp, pardon the pun. Second game, Bulldogs versus the Dragons. Look, the Bulldogs got the win, but honestly, I didn't see a huge change from the Dogs compared to the back end of last season. Galvin worked pretty hard, got plenty of touches, and you always get some Stephen Crichton magic in there. But their forwards, to me, still struggle to bend the line. And I feel like they lack that little bit of creativity out of dummy half. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves this season. I actually felt for the Dragons. They defended with a lot of courage and probably deserved something from that game. That strip call late, I thought that was quite harsh. A draw might have been a fairer result. Moving to the Storm versus the Eels. Wow. Melbourne absolutely carved up Para for the second straight year. In my opinion, Harry Grant was 11 out of 10. Absolutely outstanding. Even with a few changes to their side, the Storm still have stars everywhere. Munster, Hughes, Grant, the new kid that's playing at number 1, and a forward pack that just seems to keep sort of rumbling through the middle. But to be honest, I didn't expect them to put 50 on the Eels, though. But in saying that, I thought Parramatta were pretty poor. I know it's only early in the season, but I was actually expecting, and I'm sure you were, a lot more from the Eels in game one. Let's go to the Warriors versus the Roosters, mate. Ouch. I actually thought the Warriors really rolled the Roosters through the middle. The likes of Jackson Ford, James Fisher-Harris, and Clark all making big meters. For the Roosters, the only real meter eater was Nafau White, and he had pretty much little support around him. The much talked about Roosters halves, our mates Walker and DCE. Look, to be honest, they were disappointing in their first outing, below par in attack, and even worse in defence. They'll definitely be targeted defensively this season. And the other thing that's disappointing is that what really hurt the Roosters, no different to the last couple of seasons, their poor discipline. Although, to their credit, they did fight back in the second half. And probably to be fair, a couple of the Warriors' tries did come off some pretty lucky bounces and lucky catches as well.
Broncos Panthers. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people like me that were really looking forward to this game, which was the marquee matchup of the weekend. It didn't turn out that way. The Panthers blanked the Broncos, and it wasn't just a scoreline. There was something about the night in Brisbane, from the fans to the coaches to the players. The whole thing just seemed curiously listless. I mean, come on, Madge, at least throw a clipboard or do something. And you know what happens when you don't bring energy against the Panthers? Those ruthless bastards will grind you into dust. The Sharks Titans, Parramatta were happy that the Titans didn't turn up because they threw up an equal worst performance of the round with an absolutely lifeless capitulation to the Sharks. Different coach, same Titans. For all of our people on the Goldie, let's hope not. Seagulls Raiders. Okay, now we're into it. This was without a doubt the game of the round. A seesaw of an encounter in the rain at Brookie. A couple of things. Canberra showed their attacking bona fides. Manly showed some long sought-after backbone, something that hasn't always been the case in the Seabold era. And Ethan Sanders, Canberra's freshly minted number 7, showed the audacity of youth by calmly slotting the field goal, the winning field goal for the Raiders in Golden Point. And the final game of the weekend, Dolphins South. So it was the much-anticipated debut of South's Back to the Future lineup. And they pretty much fired a warning shot to the rest of the competition with an attacking masterclass against the Dolphins. They're lethal left edge, and whenever you're talking about South's left edge, you're often throwing in the word lethal. Well, it's become even more potent with the addition of David Fafita. However, just this little nagging feeling I do have about the Rabbitohs. To be truly elite, they have to get it through their heads that you need to tackle as well. Giving up 30 points to the Dolphins is not something which is going to get you into the business end of the season in October. So we've made it through a speed round, Johnny. We might need to sort of increase our speed a little bit. That was a little bit slow. It was a little bit like the Parramatta three-quarter line, but we've made it through unscathed, mate. Now, on to what caught your attention over the weekend. What caught your eye?
Okay, mate. So 2 things caught my eye during round 1. First was just how typical Penrith looked. They were cool, calm, and incredibly clinical. You can tell that they're probably still hurting from last season, and they came into round 1 with the focus that they seemingly lacked at the beginning of last season. I thought Dylan Edwards was absolutely massive, especially after his past season last year. And their leaders, the typical Cleary, Yo, To'o, they did what they've done so effectively over the last sort of half a decade, put the Penrith way into action. And you're probably asking, what is the Penrith way? It really is the basics: high completions, low errors, and strong defence. More than anything else, they just simply do the basics really better than anybody else, week after week. And it's very rare that these guys drop their guard, I thought. The second thing that caught my eye was the Canberra second rower, Noah Martin. The
Mate, he's
Green
got a great
Machine.
name.
He
Got a
sure
great name.
does.
You have to, yeah, absolutely.
He could nearly be called Noah Mitchell. The Green
Oh.
Machine's big number 12. And it wasn't just his outrageous mullet. He jagged a double and generally had a pretty massive game, running the ball with venom and bending the Manly line every time he ran the ball. The young bloke must have had a pretty big off-season to jag a starting spot in that Canberra side, and he looks like he's got he's quite a powerful unit. His first try actually reminded me of one of the Green Machine's most iconic moments. You remember the famous Steve Jackson try in the '89 Grand Final? And if he keeps this up, I'm pretty sure he'll become a pretty big fan favourite in the nation's capital.
Well, my storyline of the weekend was something that we also saw in the Panthers-Broncos game, and it was the margins of victory. It was a weekend of lopsided scores. 4 of the games were blowouts, and that included a very rare shellacking of the defending premiers, something that we haven't really seen since the Broncos themselves did it to the Seagulls on that fateful afternoon in 1988. Now, I think we need to call a spade here, Johnny. A lot of that was related to the performances of the teams themselves. The Eels, the Roosters and the Titans. If you're being charitable, you'd probably say they were underdone. If you're being honest, you'll probably say they were terrible. And again, as I mentioned in the recap of the Broncos-Panthers game, it just didn't seem like the Broncos turned up. In addition to that, Parramatta and the Roosters also got the raw end of the whistle. So there are some questionable refereeing decisions, even though blaming those performances on the ref would be like blaming the bartender when you get caught drink driving. But there was something else in the mix. There was something else that did play a role, and that was the rule changes. We have to discuss the rule changes and the impact they are having on the game, particularly the 6 again rule. It's now been a part of the game for 5 years, and this year they've actually changed the threshold for set restarts. So it was the 40, now it's been brought back to the 20. And I think you'll agree with me, John, it had a massive impact in those games in terms of how it skewed the momentum. There are entire segments where one of the teams did not get a sniff of the ball for upwards of 10 to 12 minutes. And in a game like rugby league, which moves so lightning fast, that's the kiss of death. I don't know if you saw it, but in the Saturday night game between the Raiders and the Seagulls, it was particularly egregious. This actually flashed across my television screen, and I had to do a double take. Thank God for the Foxtel rewind capability, because I rewound it to take a look at it. I didn't quite believe my eyes. The completion rate at the 12th minute, so 12 minutes into the game, Manly had completed 9 of 9 sets. And the Raiders, guess how many sets the Raiders had completed, John?
I reckon you're going to say 0.
Yeah, 0. Yeah, good guess. So the Raiders had done 0 of 0. So Ricky Stewart couldn't even complain about the completion rate of his team because they didn't get their claw on the ball. Canberra didn't touch the ball for the first 12 minutes of the game. The problem with that is it's not quite in the spirit of our game because it takes the opportunity away from one of the teams. The defending team just find it nigh impossible to get their hands on the ball. And that's something that has been a mainstay of our game, that ability to get your hands on the ball, have those 6 tackles and do something with it. It's been a cornerstone since 1908 when we started playing. Now, there are some solutions. Those solutions come from the coaches, they come from the players, but more than anything else, I think they have to come from the people who determine the rules. I think we need to look at that rule and we need to tweak it a little bit. Last weekend, it was a detraction. Fantastic football being played in some of the games, but you look at the listed scores and the first thing that does jump out at you is that there were a lot of big margins. Okay, now, mate, speaking of the grapples, it's onwards and upwards to this week's topic. Now, we are doing a review of the first round, and with that in mind, it can be only one thing within our grapple discussion this week, Johnny, and that is Vegas round. What did you make of it, JC?
Yeah, look, Noz, from my point of view, whatever Vegas round actually is, I think it's working.
Mm-hmm.
It's become this massive season launch party for the NRL, and it's really sort of cuts through the noise at this time of the year. Seeing thousands of Aussie fans, especially the Bulldog supporters, filling into Allegiant Stadium was absolutely brilliant. It really shows how far rugby league fans and will travel for their footy team. So from my point of view, I like it. What's your take, Noz?
And my first thought concerns our esteemed NRL chairman. Peter V'landys is an absolute promotional genius. Now, you think about the start of the winter sporting calendar. It's incredibly crowded. even if we just take this year as an example, we've got the start of the AFL. The Matildas are currently playing in the Asian Cup. Super Rugby, they still play Super Rugby, John?
Mate, I've got no idea, Noz. Seriously.
So maybe there's Super Rugby in the mix somewhere there as well. But regardless of all of that, Vegas round just seems to suck all of the oxygen out of the room. In the weeks leading up to the start of the season, it dominates television, newspapers, it's all over the social media feeds. And it's no wonder. It's ready-made for that period before the season kickoff, that silly season where everybody is hanging out for the football, but nothing is actually happening. So what better way to fill TV screens and social media feeds than having images of NRL fans rampaging down Fremont Street? And that's entirely down to Volandis. It was his brainchild. It was his baby. Mate, in a lot of ways, he actually reminds me of Vince McMahon from the WWE.
I reckon PVL would love that, Noz.
But he probably would. I mean, if this was professional wrestling, Volandis would have his own entrance music. If the Everest is his masterpiece in New South Wales racing, then Vegas is clearly his promotional masterpiece for the NRL. But as you said, the strange thing is I'm not entirely sure what Vegas round actually is.
Yeah, well, tell you what, Noz, why don't you hit the listeners with your take on Vegas round? Come on, give it to
Mate,
us.
I got a few of them. Don't worry about that. Firstly, and again, you touched on this in your section, it is the most extravagant season launch imaginable. Mate, in the 40 odd years that we've been following rugby league, we have witnessed some absolute promotional atrocities. Do you remember Billy Idol at the grand final? But season launches, well, they've been their own particular entity over the last 20 or 30 years. But instead of the usual lackluster function at Fox Studios, where we get a bunch of nobodies and freeloaders hobnobbing with awkward team captains, drinking Great Northern and eating gourmet meat pies, we get this giant spectacle in Las Vegas. And we get a bunch of nobodies and freeloaders hobnobbing with awkward team captains while drinking Budweiser and eating gourmet hot dogs. In that sense, Vegas is like a combination of a spectacular season launch. It's also the ultimate junket in a sport that's made junketing a fine art. And a quick interlude. In our first episode, Johnny, we did talk about our proud independence. We talked about the fact that we are not going to be beholden to any corporate overlords. But I'm just throwing this one out there. If any Southeast Asian gaming interests, any Russian oligarchs want to fly me and the missus and your good self and your lovely wife to Vegas next year, mate, we are available. I could actually think of nothing better than hobnobbing with the sports minister of Kiribati, the Lord Mayor of Fremantle, having a chat with the concierge from Wentworth Leagues. Mate, sign me up. Mate, Johnny and I are here for you. Johnny and I are here for you, guys.
Look, Noz, I've just got a little idea as well. Mate, if our little potty is still around, let's do episode 1, 2027 live from Vegas.
Mate, that sounds like a great idea. And so come on board, all of you potential sponsors. Let's fire it up. I'll even throw some of my frequent flyer points into the mix. But I'm being sincere here, John. The thing that genuinely struck me was the fans. Watching the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs supporters pouring into Allegiant Stadium was brilliant. And that's going to be the last time you actually get me saying that watching Canterbury Bankstown fans do anything was brilliant. But it was really, really touching.
They're such loyal supporters, those Doggy fans. Absolutely loyal.
But Johnny, now that all of that Vegas blitz is in the rear view, it's time to move on to round 2. So what are your thoughts on the slate of games that we have for the second round?
All right, let's start with the Broncos versus the Eels. Look, both teams are coming off pretty disappointing losses. Para were absolutely belted by the Storm, while the Broncos were pretty much outplayed by Penrith and just made far too many errors. Apart from Payne Huss, the Broncos' big guns didn't really fire at all. So I actually think Brisbane will bounce back at home and get the win.
Mate, I've got a slightly different take on this one. I don't want to sound like an Eels conspiracy theorist here, but does someone at NRL headquarters hate Parramatta? I mean, our first round, and it's the second straight year we had to go down and do this, but our first round was at Amy Park against a Storm team that's shown over the last quarter century that they never get beaten in the first round. In the second round, we headed up to Suncorp to play against the defending premiers. Now, I agree with you on this one. I think the Broncos will take it out, but Parramatta have to be better. I think Rilesley will have got stuck into them this week, and I think we'll see a team that's much more stout in defence.
Fingers crossed for you, Noz. All right, let's move to game two, Warriors versus Raiders. This one's being played in Auckland, and I just think Canberra just seem to find ways to win these tight games. Their young outside backs have some serious speed and confidence at the moment. The Warriors will be tough at home, but I just think the Raiders will sneak this one.
Mate, when I was writing my take for this, I put the Raiders in a cakewalk. I really do like the Raiders team. They showed a lot of mental toughness coming back after that first 12 minutes at Brookvale on the weekend, but you have to factor in the Warriors. If I look at my tipping over the last 4 or 5 years, the Warriors are always the wild card. Whenever I tip them to win, they lose. Whenever I tip them to lose, they win. So you can never say anything's a certainty with the Warriors. I think it'll be a fantastic encounter. I am going to say the Raiders are going to win, but it's a game that I'm curiously looking forward to. I think it's going to be really exciting and have something for the fans.
Tigers versus Cowboys. Mate, if you ask me, this is pretty much a battle of the unknowns. You just never quite know what you're going to get from either of these teams. Playing it like hard probably gives the Tigers a bit of an edge, so I'll lean that way. But I tell you what, it's not with a lot of confidence.
You're probably right not to have any confidence with that. When I read through this preview and you said that playing at Leichhardt gives the Tigers a bit of an edge, it got me to wondering, does actually playing at any one of their 12 home grounds give the Tigers an edge? I sometimes see them playing, and I think this is one of their home grounds. They'll be playing like a dog track at the back of Lidcombe or something. So, mate, I never know where the Tigers are going to turn up. I agree with you, though. This game is an absolute mystery to me. I'm leaning the Tigers, but, mate, with all the confidence of the poor old NRL scheduler when he's trying to work out where the hell they're playing each week.
Okay, let's move to Dragons versus a Storm. Look, even though this game's been played in Wollongong, it's just too hard to go past Melbourne. They've just got, mate, too much strike power across the park. So for me, yeah, it's the Storm.
But I'm going to predict this game. I'm going to be Nostradamus. That's actually the name of my tipping handle, just by the way. Never has a tipping handle been more erroneously applied. I'm going to put my Nostradamus hat on, and I'm going to predict the way that this game's going to go. The Dragons are going to be really plucky. They're going to come out. They're going to grit. They're going to grind. Gutho in particular will make everybody nod their head in admiration at just how brave he is and how he puts everything into the encounter and always goes a million miles an hour. And then the Saints will lose by 6 points.
We've read that script a few times before, I think.
Yeah. Poor old Dragons fans.
Yeah. Let's move to Panthers versus Sharks. Look, mate, the Sharks were impressive in round one, especially Tricky Trindle, really controlling the game. He had a powerful game. This one's in Bathurst, so it could be a little bit closer than people expect. You know, Penrith just know how to win these games. So for me, I think Penrith will get the chocolates.
I would not tip this Cronulla team over the Panthers if they were playing on the surface of the moon and the Sharks were the only ones wearing spacesuits. I think the Panthers in an absolute spacewalk, mate.
Wow. Okay, I'll remember that for next week when we do the review. Let's move to Sea Eagles versus the Knights. Look, Manly surprisingly heavily back from what I've seen so far. Strong favourites, which is a little bit surprising. The Knights looked quite good in round one. They've also got plenty of strike across their back line. I wouldn't be shocked if Newcastle go to Four Pines Park and actually knock Manly over. And then no doubt they'll be celebrating down the course afterwards.
So, mate, you're a little bit ambiguous with that. Are you going for the Knights in this encounter? You think Newcastle are a good team?
Yeah, I do
Oh,
actually. They impressed me in round one.
that's a brave tip. I think it'll be a really interesting encounter. I do like the Knights. So I agree with everything that you said when you reviewed the Knights North Queensland game in Vegas. Fantastic backline. But just watching that backline gel, they had speed, they had youth, they had creativity. I'm a massive fan of Bradman Best, and having Best on the end of Fletcher Sharp creativity and Dylan Brown's ability just to play direct and go into the line. I think it's going to be one of the real things to watch this season. That said, they are still a little bit raw. And again, Manly aren't necessarily the Manly of the past, but it is always challenging to go into Brookvale and get a win. They weren't bad against a strong Raiders team. So with all that in mind, I'm leaning towards the Seagulls, but more than anything else, I'm hoping, again, it's a good open encounter because those Sunday afternoons at Brookvale, if they play a wide open brand of football, they're fantastic.
Let's move to the Dolphins versus the Titans. As we saw on the weekend, the Dolphins can score points. They did it pretty much all season last year, but their biggest problem is that they leak. They leak plenty. There's a lot of attacking talent there, but their defense needs massive work. The Titans will probably struggle this season, so I'm tipping the Dolphins in what's probably going to be a pretty high-scoring game, to be honest.
The scoreboard attendant is going to be very, very busy in this game. I think the Titans will be better. Much like Parramatta, they have to be better. They can't turn up for the second week in a row and play with the same poor effort that they put in at Shark Park last Saturday. I mean, if you look at that game, they brought a lettuce leaf to a knife fight, and hopefully they've learned from the experience. That said, this Dolphins side, they do have plenty of firepower. I think it's going to be an exciting encounter, but I think that the Dolphins are special. Okay, now people listening will have noticed that we left one game off. So every week we're going to have a game of the week where we're going to talk in a little bit more detail. And this week there is only one possible choice, and that's a clash that's been giving us games of the week since 1908. That's the Chooks and the Rabbits. So, Johnny, I know you'll be watching this one with a lot of interest. What's your take on the encounter coming up?
All right, so Roosters versus Rabbitohs, calling it the Battle of Alliance. Look, this should be a sellout. South looked pretty good against the Dolphins, especially their lethal left edge, as you said earlier. Plenty of tries, and their big guns really, really stepping up. Look, the Roosters will be hurting after round one, and there's already pressure on their halves, DCE and Walker. I'm actually surprised the Roosters are starting as favourites with the bookies so far. I'm sure that'll tighten as the week goes on. But look, as I said, this game should be a cracker. The Roosters need their forwards to really step up. And as a team, to be honest, they need to be far more disciplined.
Firstly, with local derbies, and this is the most fearsome of all of the local derbies that we have across the NRL, you can throw the script out the window. They're often an entity unto themselves. But I agree with you, Johnny. It all comes down to discipline for the Chooks. If you look at the last 5 or 6 years, in fact, probably since they won the competition, when they had Cooper Cronk leading them around the park, mate, their discipline since those years has really let them down. And if they do play with their usual lack of discipline, the likes of Latrell, Cody, Fafita, Jai Gray, mate, they'll take them to the cleaners. Now, this is again is particular to you and I, but it's great to see two MCR boys back on the field. Cam Murray. Now, I know that Cam's only partially a Masterland boy, but particularly Campbell Graham. Campbell has had a horror stretch with injuries over the last couple of years. I think he's a really important part of the South's team. He just gives that three-quarter line of theirs a little bit of stability. So they've got plenty of X factor. Campbell just comes in and provides steady play. He makes sure that they're not losing their mind. I'm leaning South in this one. The other thing, you mentioned that it is the Battle of Alliance. This is a direct plea to Chris Minns. I'm sure that he's paying rapt attention. But come on, Chris. Let the Rabbitohs go back to Alliance. It's absolutely ridiculous to have the South Sydney Rabbitohs playing at Homebush. So whatever contract you've got keeping them in place at Homebush, let's just get out the scissors and cut it up. Rabbitohs go back to Moore Park.
Let's discuss that one for another day, mate. Hey, just adding to this game, should Alex Johnson break Ken Irvine's try scoring record? A question: are we okay for the fans to immediately jump the fence at an Alliance and run on the field? That'll be interesting. But look, I definitely get the reasons for not allowing it. But I tell you what, it'd be kind of cool to see it happen. So let's see. But ultimately, I want to make sure my little Chookies can get over our rivals, the Rabbitohs.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. It's a tradition in the AFL when somebody kicks 1,000 goals. They did it last when Buddy kicked 1,000 goals. And I think they also do it when someone kicks 100 goals for the season. Now, I've got my own particular point of view here. With AFL, it doesn't really matter. There's so many people on the field that even if you add another 20,000, you probably can't even tell. With rugby league, it's going to get in the way of the game. And also, just with the nature of rugby league fans, mate, I'll put this out there. If they do allow for that, I am betting London to a brick that after they manage to clear everybody off the field, the corner posts aren't there anymore. I suspect they'll be souvenired by someone. You probably have the Channel 9 cameraman chasing some kid in the crowd trying to get the little sideline camera back. So now...
And the pads around the goalpost, they'll be gone as well.
Yeah, they'll be gone as well. Mate, thanks for that. We've set the scene for what promises to be a pretty exciting round of games. And now we talked about this at the top. I'm pretty proud of this little segment, Johnny. You and I workshopped some ideas. You thought of the idea, I came up with the name, and it's our opportunity to improvise and talk about one aspect of the great game of rugby league. It is free balling. Every week, one of us is going to talk about something, anything that we want to, as long as it relates to the greatest game of all. So again, there's a bit of a scope there. We can channel our inner John Coltrane and be improvisational. And this week you're up, mate. So what have you got for us?
All right, mate. I'm going to kick off with my top 8 prediction for season 2026. So the season's just started. We've had round 1, but I've crystal balled how I think the teams will finish. And no doubt we can check back at the end of the season just to see how good, or probably more than likely how terrible I was. So here's my top 8 in order. I think Penrith will finish first. I see them climbing to the top of the mountain again. Storm will come in at number 2, just too many superstars. My Chooks, I think, will finish 3rd. And look, to be honest, a lot of that hinges on the Cronk 2.0 experiment. And my man Teddy, the greatest Italian to ever play in the NRL. I think Canberra will round out the top 4. I just think they got the best balance of exciting youth and some good hard experience. Sharks will finish 5th. They just seem to always finish around the midsection of the top 8. Sometimes I don't know how, but they just seem to do it year on year. Broncos, I've got them coming in at 6th. I actually see them slipping this season. And our mate Grease Lightning Walsh, mate, will he have more diamond performances than rocks this season? Time will tell, and obviously a lot of what Broncos do hinges on Reece Walsh. South, I've got them finishing at 7. I think they're going to be the big improvers of the season, but there's a little caveat there. They need their big names to play majority of games together during the season to finish in the top 8. And I obviously got big question mark there over Latrell. And then rounding out the 8, I can't split them. I've got the Warriors or the Dogs. And look, I'm not sure at this stage who sneaks into the 8. So based on last year, the only new team breaking into the 8 is South. And as I said, I just can't split the Dogs and the Warriors for the last spot yet. My early feelings, the Dogs might just miss out. And Noz, we may have already lost a few listeners from our school chat group with that call. So just to be fair, what I'm asking is I'll reconfirm who takes that 8th spot at the end of round 8, if that's all right.
A couple of things about that list. It is a good list. A lot of the teams I would probably have in my top 8 as well. I also think it's time to shout out the fact that we do have way too many Bulldogs fans in our life. So on our school WhatsApp group, it's seemingly like 2/3 of the people on the group are Bulldogs fans. They're probably not going to be too happy with your conceit that they're not going to make the top 8. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they're a top 8 special. The second thing, I think your Roosters dance mum characteristics are really coming to the fore. But I don't think anyone who watched round 1 thought that was a top 4 team running around in Auckland last week. That Chooks team does have a lot of work to do. But yeah, top 4 might be a little bit of a stretch for the red, white and blue at this particular time. Well, folks, that's it. The second episode of NRL Offside is in the can. Thanks for everyone who tuned in again. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Look down just below the podcast on your streaming platform of choice. You'll see the follow button. Give that a little bit of a press. It'll mean that we'll appear in your feed every week. Share it with a mate or two, female as well, if you've got any females who love rugby league in your life. We'd also love to hear your feedback or suggestions. So see you again next week. Hopefully JC and I have replaced our first round grimaces with second round grins when it comes to the Eels and the Chooks. But thanks again for listening. Johnny, round us out.
Thanks, Noz. Goodbye, listeners. And look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care.